Hello students, animators, rotoscopers, countrymen. Welcome to the long anticipated, long procrastinated tutorial on how to draw frame by frame with your hands, hopefully with a tablet, maybe an iPad Pro, an AstroPad Studio, in order to rotoscope and to draw frame by frame. This is a super handy thing you can do in Photoshop, which pretty much everybody has on their computer. I would recommend that you not try to do this with your mouse or your trackpad, but if that's all you've got, then so be it. You should see my links for buying a tablet. The Huion tablet is very reasonable though, and the smaller Wacom tablets are also very reasonable. So first thing, we should talk about how to set up a document for drawing frame by frame in Photoshop. In my Photoshop document, I've got a brand new 1920 by 1080 pixel transparent background document here. I've got my video timeline here at the bottom. If you don't see your video timeline, just like any other thing you're looking for, any other panel you're looking for in Photoshop, it's going to be under Window. Timeline, as you can see, is on. Now, if yours looks different than this, you might want to try clicking this button at the bottom left of your timeline. But when you fire up a new document at 1920 1080, you should get just a generic timeline like this, and then you'll see this button right here that says Create Video Timeline. I'm going to click that right now, and you'll see that it automatically gives me this purple layer here called Layer 1, which is not what we want. This is a static, regular Photoshop layer. This is just how it shows up in our video timeline. If we go over to our regular old layers panel, the thing that you're used to seeing in Photoshop, you will see that it's just a standard layer. This is not what we're looking for to be able to paint frame by frame in Photoshop. What we need is called a video layer. So I'm going to go take you up here to Layer, Video Layers, and I'm going to say New Blank Video Layer. That gives me a blue layer that has a little icon here, a little film strip. That's what you want to be drawing frame by frame on. Now I'm going to leave this static Layer 1 layer here because what those are useful for is having a solid background color that never changes. You don't paint on it, but it just prevents you from seeing the transparency checkers. So this is a video layer, this is a standard layer. I'm going to flip these back. I'm going to make my foreground color white, and I'm going to fill Layer 1 with white. There we go. I got to make sure to select Layer 2 so that I can draw on Layer 2. Alright, some very important things you want to set up before you start drawing frames in Photoshop. FYI, painting frame by frame is a very time-intensive process. You don't want to discover that you've been doing 3 times as much work as you really had to do. So here are some things that you want to set up before we get started. This menu I went to up here under the Layer menu. Layer Video Layers is going to give you a lot of the functionality you're going to need for frame by frame animation. One of those is New Blank Video Layer, as you saw. Insert blank frame and delete frame. Technically, it says it's possible to do those. I have noticed in my experience that those completely destroy your animation and delete frames and wreck things, so let's stay away from those for now. Rasterize, hide altered video. We're going to ignore everything under here except for new video layer from file and new blank video layer. So that is where these two functions are under Layer Video Layers. Everything else that is important for your success in frame by frame animation is going to be over here in the timeline on the top right. This is called a flyout menu. Every single Adobe program, every panel in every Adobe program ever made has a flyout menu at the top right of every panel. Timeline is no different. This has lots of things you're going to need to succeed at frame by frame animation. The first thing and the most important thing for you to set is set timeline frame rate. I cannot communicate to you the importance of set timeline frame rate. Double checking that and knowing where you're at. Let's just set that right now. See? This is not helpful. 2997, that's almost 30 frames a second. That is the standard frame rate for video. However, we're not making a standard video, we are making an animation. And when you're drawing one whole drawing for every frame, you're going to want to draw at like 12 or 15 frames a second. For this example, we're going to draw at 12 frames per second. So set timeline frame rate. See, that's already done some funky things down here. Well, I think the length is the same actually. Now, one thing you'll notice here is that I've only got 5 seconds on my timeline. That's what 5 o'clock F means. One quirk of Photoshop animation, frame-by-frame animation, is that you can't ever extend a video layer. You can trim it shorter from the end or the beginning of the layer, the right or the left side of the layer, but you can never extend a video layer. Also, I have not found out a reliable way to extend the duration of my timeline. Now, I've only got 5 seconds here, and if you are doing the frame-by-frame assignment, you'll know that you need at least 10 seconds of animation at a minimum of 12 frames per second. So how are we going to do that? Well, you're in luck because the static layer, this purple layer here, static layers in Photoshop do enable you to stretch them out beyond the initial length. So what I'm going to do is stretch this out 11 seconds. Let's go to like 12 seconds because I want to give myself a couple seconds of leeway. Now, I still can't extend my video layer, but I did extend the length of my animation, which is what you're going to need, at least 10 seconds, right? And now, if I go up and I create a new video layer, video layers, new blank video layer, you will see that it stretches out for the full 12 seconds. And in fact, I'm going to delete layer 2 because I don't need that anymore. You'll notice I'm going over to the standard layers panel to delete layer 2 because I can't really do that from my timeline. Next thing to set, in addition to set timeline frame rate, is enable timeline shortcut keys. You need that to be checked. What that does is it will enable you to move from frame to frame just with your arrow keys, your directional arrow keys on your keyboard, which is much easier than trying to find it on the menu or setting your own custom keyboard shortcut. Let's just double check that we are drawing at the right size here. Image size 1920 by 1080 at 72 dpi in an RGB Photoshop file. We are now ready to start drawing. Now, I am fortunate enough to have borrowed an iPad Pro 12-inch with the Apple Pencil. So I'm going to just draw a couple strokes here, make sure I've got my brush. I've got a 60 pixel, that's probably a little bit thick. Power user tip, power user design and illustration look and feel tip. When you are rotoscoping in Photoshop, here let's change our ink color back to, our foreground color back to black. When you're rotoscoping, the thinner your brush size, the more interesting things look, because what that allows you to do is just stay sketchy. The advantage of drawing with Apple Pencil and a Wacom tablet is that it is pressure sensitive, and I have found in my experience with frame-by-frame drawing, hey look, it's a t-shirt. I don't know why that happened, but it is much more interesting if your lines are thinner. Thin and sketchy is more interesting than these giant, thick, elementary school looking crayon lines. I'm going to go even thinner than that, I think. I'm going to go down to 15. And I'm going to, well, since I'm drawing shirts, why not draw a pair of pants? There we go. Okay. All right, now, I just noticed that I did not check what layer I was drawing on. I have been drawing on the static white layer, which is not what I want. I want to show you how to draw frame by frame. So what I'm going to do here is, I already have everything selected. If I didn't have, see the marching ants thing here? If I did not have my whole document selected, I would just hit Command A here. Make sure I'm on my static layer, and I can delete. And then I'm going to refill with white. I'm hitting Option. I just hit X to flip my foreground, my background to my foreground. Now my foreground's white. Now I'm going to hit Option, Delete on my keyboard to fill my static layer with white. Now I'm going to go and select my video layer. Instead of layer 3, let's call it artwork. Close that. Now that I have that selected and my frame rate is correct, I've got timeline shortcut keys enabled and my resolution is where I want it to be. Yeah, artwork layer is selected. I'm going to go back, grab my brush and my tablet, and I'm going to start drawing again. And I like that pair of pants, so I'm going to do that again. Oops, I'm drawing with white. You can't see anything. I'm going to hit X to shift back to black. There we go. Here's a walking pair of pants. This pair of pants is walking. There's there's some pockets. All right. So now what's going to happen with my timeline shortcut keys function enabled, I can hit the right arrow key button and I can start drawing again. Now what I don't like is that I can't see the pair of pants that I previously drew. So what I'm going to do is enable onion skinning, something called onion skinning. Let's go to my flyout menu and my timeline, and let's enable onion skins. I now see a ghosted, about 50% opacity version of my pants. I'm not going to draw, it's showing me the frame previous to the frame I'm on now, which is frame 2. If I zoom way in here in my timeline, you'll see that I am not on frame 1, see, full strength. Frame 2 shows me the ghosted image of the previous frame, and I can draw that as a reference, so I'll know where I've been. It definitely helps with animation. Onion skin settings, I'm going to say I want to see like 3 frames before the current frame I'm on. It doesn't make any difference because I've only drawn 1 frame, but it will as soon as we get going here. Actually a little bit heavier than I would like. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go under onion skin settings and change the opacity. Yes, I'm going to change that down to 25 for max and minimum 10. Click OK. Hopefully that'll help. Okay. Draw another frame here. Now our left leg is bent. Still got our pockets. Okay, I've got 3 frames of animation here. Not a lot, but for the sake of your time and mine, I'm going to, for replay, I like to turn off onion skin. It does give you kind of a cool, echoey video effect, but that's not what I'm after right now. I also want to set my work area to my current time, where my playhead is. Work area, set end at playhead. I've got 3 frames here now that if I press play here, it's going. It doesn't really look like, it looks like 2 frames. That's because it is. I need my work area to end right here. As I always like to point out when using After Effects or frame-by-frame animation in Photoshop, the playhead in both of those programs lies to the left of the current frame. See, this is the frame, this little gray area right here. That is the frame. The playhead sits to the left of that. Now I am previewing all 3 frames. There we go. That looks a little more fun. I wish it was 10 times as long, but for the sake of this tutorial, the length of this tutorial, I'm going to leave it at that for now. So what have we learned? The things that we need to check before we start drawing in Photoshop are the frame rate. Secondly, check your image size, the resolution of your image, and make sure that timeline shortcut keys is checked.